in this video, we're going to talk a little bit about text objects in Unity. I'm going to assume that you already have a project open, a canvas set up, and I do have a panel on here just to make it look a little bit nicer. If you need to set those up, or you're not quite certain how to do that, please refer to the other videos that deal with those subjects that you should have watched before this one. So as far as text objects go, we are just going to be working with the basic text objects. So if in any of these UI videos you see a Text Mesh Pro object, don't use those, just use the regular ones. So I want to create a text object on my panel here. So I'm going to find it in my hierarchy. I'm going to right click on it, go to UI, and I'm going to choose text. Again, we're not using Text Mesh Pro, we just work with the regular old text one. So just choose text. And we should get a new text object in our scene. And we can see that since we create it with our main panel selected, it is a child of our panel. If for some reason it is not, like it's behind it, you see how we don't see it because main panel is visible before that, and we do need to make it a child of it. You can just drag and drop them to fix that problem. So let me go back to that. And let's talk a little bit about some characteristics of this. First of all, if you're doing UI, you're going to end up with a lot of text objects. You should probably name it something other than text, because if you need to do manipulations to it in your script later, it's going to be very hard to find it to hook it up correctly. So whenever you create a new text, make sure you have it selected and go to the inspector and give it a different name. Keep text in there so you know exactly what kind of object it is, but give it a unique identifier probably in front of it, such as like if this is like my title text. So I'm just going to put title. I'm going to keep text so I know that it is a text object. I hit enter. I can see that it does change in my hierarchy, so it's a little bit easier to find, and I know that that's what this is. One important thing with text objects, and this goes for all UI elements, you should never change the scale of any of your UI elements. So if we needed to make this bigger, we should not try to scale it. And I'm going to do it just to show you why you shouldn't do it. Because if we start scaling it, look what happens. Do you see how it's all kind of pixelated? That's because we're not really changing the, we're not making it bigger. This is more like you're bringing it really close to your face. You're not actually changing the size of it. So the scale on your UI elements should always be 1. You should never change these, or it's going to look really bad. You might lose points because it's going to get all skewed and look super pixelated. If you need to change the size of your text, you have to change your font size right here. See it says font size? Not this, font size. So I'm going to change it from 14. We can put any number we want in here. Since this is going to be my title text, I probably want it kind of big. So if I put in something like 72 to make it big, notice how it disappeared, and you might get a little bit scared at first and think you broke something. You did not break anything. You just need to change the actual size of that text box. Do you see how it's like a box right here? Rather than scaling it, don't scale it again. We want to use this rect tool right here, this one right here, not this one, the scale tool, the rect tool. And if we click and drag on the sides to make this bigger, once we get it big enough, we'll see our text again. So if your text ever disappears after you change the size of the font, all it means is you need to change the size of your text box. So we got a different size, and we can move it around also with that tool to make sure that it's in a nice spot. But what if we don't want it to say new text? We want it to have our name. That's just this text box right here. You can give it your first name, last name, whatever you want to put in here. Notice that I made my text too much and it disappeared again. We just solve this as we did with the font size problem. We just make our box bigger until we see it. Sometimes it will work this way too. If we make it longer, it'll pop off on the bottom, but if you want it to be wide, we can just resize it longer. And then we can reposition it again. If you do want it centered, you probably actually want to change the alignment of it. So rather down here underneath paragraph alignment, rather than left aligned, we can make it center aligned. So it would be a little bit easier to line up right in the middle of our stuff. We could also align it to be in the middle of our text box. So by default, it's at the top. So if we made it really big, it's going to be at the top. But if we click the center, it'll be in the middle. Click the bottom one, it'll be at the bottom of that. So we can kind of get this looking a little bit nicer based on our alignment. The other thing you can change with your text tool is the color of it. And we do that right here with color. We just click on this and we can change it to whatever color we want. I'm going to be boring and put it on black, but I do also want to point out that we can change the alpha of that. Just like in previous videos, we were changing the alpha of the panels. So if we pull that down, notice it does get slightly transparent. So we can go full transparency, not transparent. So be aware of this down here with what you choose. And that's it. Text objects aren't very complex. The big things to remember: make sure you're naming them something unique, but keep the word text in there so it's easy to find. Never scale. Always use the rect tool to change the size of your box. Also, if you need to change the size of your actual font, use the font size, not the scale. If your text disappears, make the box bigger and see, how big it is. It's most likely if your text disappears, that's the problem with it. Make sure you use your alignment so that you can make it look nice, and remember that you can change the color of the text.